Pisces, be prepared because it is far from over. The solar eclipse already happened, but for you specifically, that eclipse may have been the quiet part, not the loud one. In just a few days, a second eclipse arrives, a partial lunar eclipse, and this time it lands somewhere far more personal for you than people realize. This is the in-between week, the week sitting directly between what already happened and what is about to happen. And Pisces, this is exactly the kind of week your sign was built to misread, because you feel everything before you can explain it. And this week, you are going to feel something shifting long before you understand what it actually is. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through may already be happening to you right now, and you may not have realized it yet. Think back to the solar eclipse. For a sign as intuitive as you, that day may not have felt like a lightning bolt. It may have felt more like a quiet knowing, a moment where something inside you softened or hardened, or simply became certain in a way you couldn't quite explain out loud. Maybe you finally admitted something to yourself. Maybe you stopped pretending a certain feeling wasn't there. Maybe you quietly decided to protect your peace from someone or something that had been draining it. Nothing outwardly changed that day. No dramatic announcement, no visible shift in your life. And that is exactly why this week matters so much for you. You are still between the two eclipses, Pisces, which means whatever you planted underneath the surface on that day has not finished growing yet. You are a sign that lives in the underneath. Your feelings arrive before your understanding does. And that means whatever seed was planted during the first eclipse is still developing somewhere below your conscious awareness, even while your daily life looks completely unremarkable. The lunar eclipse is about to act like the first real checkpoint, not the finish line, not the reveal, just the first honest look at what actually took root. Something you thought was the most important desire in your life right now might start to feel less urgent. Something small, something you almost dismissed, might start quietly taking up more emotional space than you expected. That is not a contradiction, Pisces. That is simply what happens when a feeling has time to mature instead of being rushed. What was planted does not have to look the same by the time the second eclipse arrives. Sometimes for you specifically, the first sign that an intention is actually working is that it starts to feel different than you imagined it would. August may genuinely be the most misleading stretch of this entire month for you, Pisces, because on the surface, almost nothing may seem different. After all the buildup and attention around August 12th, that can feel disorienting for a sign that is this sensitive to emotional atmosphere. You were told something powerful was happening, and then a few days pass and your life looks almost exactly the same as it did before. For you, that quiet can easily be mistaken for nothing happening at all. But here is what you need to understand about your own nature this week. You do not process shifts the way other signs do. You feel first and understand later, which means the very thing that looks like stillness on the outside could actually be you quietly absorbing and reorganizing on the inside. If everything became obvious the moment the eclipse ended, there would be nothing left for you to discover. The more likely truth is that these first few days stay ordinary on the surface, while something underneath you continues becoming more defined, more real, more undeniable, even while nothing dramatic is visibly occurring. This is the trap for you specifically. If you judge these first 3 days only by how emotionally quiet they feel, you may convince yourself too early that this week has nothing to offer you. But you are not at the conclusion yet, Pisces. You're in the part where feelings are still gathering weight before they become clear enough to name. Do not confuse a slow beginning with an empty one. For a water sign, the stillest water is often the water moving the most beneath its surface. There is a very specific group of Pisces who may find this week more revealing than the eclipse itself, and that is the group who felt genuinely nothing when it happened. No overwhelming emotional wave, no dramatic intuitive flash, no sudden clarity, nothing that matched what everyone online described experiencing. If that was you, do not force meaning onto that day simply because other people say theirs was powerful. You were not broken and you did not miss anything. Instead, this week gives you a much better question to ask. Instead of, what did I feel during the eclipse? Ask yourself, what has quietly become different since it happened? Has your attention drifted towards something you barely used to think about? Has one option started to feel more emotionally right than another, even without a clear reason why? Has something that felt urgent and consuming just last week already started to lose its grip on you? These small shifts are not proof the eclipse caused anything directly, but Pisces, you are exactly the sign that misses these clues because you are waiting for one enormous cinematic feeling, when in truth, your biggest emotional turns are usually recognized only after they've already been quietly unfolding for days. That is what makes August 18th through 23rd more interesting than the eclipse itself for anyone who felt nothing that day. You are no longer looking for an instant emotional reaction. You are looking backward and asking whether something inside you has already begun rearranging itself without demanding your attention the way you expected it to. There is one thing I want to caution you against very directly this week, Pisces, and it is the pull toward absolute finality. You are naturally drawn to closure rituals, especially you, because unresolved emotion is uncomfortable for a sign as sensitive as yours. Burning something to declare it finished, deleting a conversation to symbolically end it forever, cutting a cord because you have decided there is nothing left to feel, sealing a decision emotionally before you have even seen what the second eclipse is going to bring you. The problem is not letting go, Pisces. The problem is forcing certainty before the story is actually finished. This week sits directly between two eclipses, which means whatever you are trying to close right now may only be changing form, not actually ending. Something that currently feels finished to you may still reveal information you do not have yet. Someone or something you were ready to release completely may return in a way you did not expect, useful again in a form you cannot picture right now. Even a decision that feels obvious to you in this exact moment could look different once the second eclipse gives you more context to work with. Closure feels good, especially to a sign that absorbs so much unresolved emotion from the people and situations around it. But premature closure can make you loyal to an ending that was never actually complete. You do not need to keep every door open forever, Pisces. Just be careful about locking one shut this week, simply because sitting in uncertainty feels unbearable. There is a real difference between recognizing that something is over and needing it to be over before you actually know that it is. There is another kind of advantage available to you this week, Pisces, and it has nothing to do with fate, timing, or being chosen. Sometimes you benefit simply because everyone else stops showing up. Think about how often this plays out. Something begins with too much competition, too many people wanting the exact same outcome, too much noise around it, and it can start to feel like there is barely room left for you. Then time passes, the excitement fades for everyone else, people get distracted, someone decides it's taking too long, another person quietly gives up, and suddenly the thing that once felt crowded and impossible is nowhere near as crowded as it used to be. This matters for you specifically because you are a sign that often doubts your own persistence. You question whether staying was the right choice, whether you should have moved on already, whether your patience is actually wisdom or just avoidance dressed up as faith. But sometimes the opportunity did not get bigger, Pisces. The crowd around it simply got smaller. You may not need a miracle this week. You may simply need to still be present now that other people have already moved on. This can show up in ways you don't immediately notice. Maybe you applied for something everyone else applied for too, and half of them never followed through. Maybe you started something that looked completely oversaturated, but most people quit the moment it stopped feeling exciting. Maybe you have quietly kept building something while people around you jumped from idea to idea. Persistence creates space that did not exist at the start. This is not the cliché never give up message. Sometimes walking away really is the right decision. The point is recognizing when nothing has actually gotten worse. You are simply in the slow, boring middle where fewer people are willing to stay. And Pisces, that middle can completely change your odds. One of the most Pisces-specific experiences this week involves something you already mentally filed away as finished. After the first eclipse, some of you looked at a situation, a person, a possibility, and quietly decided the answer was obvious. It was rejected. It went quiet. It was delayed one too many times. It did not move the way you hoped, so your mind filed it under closed. But this week may challenge that conclusion because not everything that goes quiet is actually complete. Something can return without returning in the exact same form it left. An opportunity that felt dead may resurface through a completely different person or route. A conversation that ended badly may reopen under different circumstances. A situation that looked entirely finished may reveal one missing detail that changes how you understand everything that came before it. The ending itself may have been real, Pisces, but your interpretation of that ending may have been incomplete because you tend to feel the emotional weight of an ending before you fully understand what actually caused it. This is not about obsessively hoping old things come back, and it is not permission to pretend every closed door is secretly still open. It is about recognizing that the space between these two eclipses may expose which situations were genuinely finished and which ones were simply unfinished in a way you couldn't see clearly yet. The shock is not necessarily that the exact same thing returns to you. The shock may be that something you had already emotionally released suddenly becomes relevant again for a reason you never would have predicted. If there is one practical thing worth watching for this week, Pisces, it is repetition. Not vague symbolism, not obsessively hunting for numbers, not forcing every coincidence into some grand spiritual meaning. I mean actual situations repeating themselves in a way that becomes hard to explain away. A similar opportunity appearing twice from two completely unrelated places, the same obstacle interrupting two separate plans, two different people bringing up the exact same subject without knowing the other one mentioned it, something you dismissed earlier in August returning again in a slightly different form, asking for your attention a second time. That does not automatically make it mystical, and this is not an invitation to turn your entire week into a puzzle where everything has to mean something. But repetition matters for you specifically because you are a sign that feels things intensely the first time and then talks yourself out of them just as quickly. The first time something happens, it's easy to dismiss. Maybe the timing was random, maybe that person just happened to bring it up, but when the same theme returns a second time through a completely different route, it starts earning more of your attention, whether you consciously decide to give it or not. That doesn't mean you have to act on it immediately. It simply means you stop treating it as background noise. Maybe you've been quietly considering a change but haven't taken it seriously, and then two unrelated situations suddenly point toward the exact same direction. Maybe you keep running into the same emotional pattern in different areas of your life, which forces you to finally look at what that pattern actually is. The repetition matters because it shows persistence. One event can be a coincidence. A repeated event shows the subject still carries real weight. And Pisces, sometimes what repeats isn't an opportunity at all. It's the same mistake wearing two different disguises. Ask whether the repeated event actually changes a real decision for you. That's what separates a meaningful clue from noise. There is something strange that happens to nearly everyone moving through a transitional period like this, and it may apply to you more than most. Signs people rarely recognize the shift while they're standing inside of it. They recognize it afterward, once the pieces have already connected. When the second eclipse arrives, most people will look at that exact moment as the turning point, the thing that changed everything. But the truth is usually quieter than that. Some of the most important movement in your life this week may start well before the second eclipse ever arrives, during these ordinary, forgettable days between August 18th and 23rd. Something may begin now without looking significant enough to remember. A possibility may slowly start feeling more real. A decision may begin quietly leaning in one direction. A person may resurface. A problem may remove one of your options for you without you even asking it to. Something you were unsure about may start feeling easier to read, not because of one dramatic sign, but because several small, unremarkable details begin pointing the same direction at once. Then the second eclipse arrives, and suddenly the whole thing feels obvious, and it becomes easy to assume the eclipse itself created that clarity. But you, more than most, tend to feel a shift long before you can name it, and then forget just how long you had already been feeling it once the answer becomes clear. That is the retrospective effect worth understanding here. By the time the second eclipse arrives, you may look back and realize that this week, the one you assumed was empty, was actually the week your direction quietly became visible. You just didn't have enough information yet to notice it while it was happening. The most dangerous mistake this week is a simple one: waiting for August 28th before you allow yourself to move. When you know a bigger spiritual date is approaching, it is very easy to start treating the days before it like a waiting room. You tell yourself you'll see how you feel after the eclipse. You'll make the decision then. You'll finally start the thing then. You'll wait for the emotional clarity to arrive on its own. And without meaning to, anticipation quietly turns into avoidance. That distinction matters enormously for you, Pisces, because anticipation can genuinely be useful. It can make you more observant, more attuned to patterns, more reflective about where your life is actually heading. But avoidance is something else entirely. Avoidance uses the future as an excuse to avoid dealing with what is already sitting right in front of you today. And Pisces specifically tends to romanticize waiting because waiting feels gentle, feels safe, feels like faith. But waiting for the right moment becomes dangerous the instant the waiting itself starts making the decision for you. Imagine something ordinary shows up in front of you this week. It doesn't look spiritual. It doesn't arrive wrapped in perfect timing. It's simply an opportunity, a practical decision, an invitation, a conversation, a chance to finally finish something you started. But because August 28th is sitting in the back of your mind, you hesitate. You tell yourself to wait and see what the next eclipse brings. That can sound reasonable, but sometimes it's just fear, wearing spiritual language to make itself feel acceptable. There are moments when waiting truly is wise, when you genuinely need more information before you act. But there are also moments when you already have everything you need, and you're only waiting because choosing would make the situation real. That is where an entire week can quietly slip away from you. The irony is that you can become so focused on watching the calendar for August 28th that you completely miss the very thing this eclipse season was supposed to make you more aware of in the first place. Life does not pause between eclipses, Pisces. Choices still carry consequences. Opportunities still expire. People still change their minds. Something can feel easy today and feel much harder by next week. Spiritual awareness means very little if it only teaches you to wait for the sky instead of noticing what is already right in front of you. That is the balance this week is asking of you. Do not become impatient just because you want something dramatic to happen before the 28th, but do not become passive either, telling yourself that stillness is the same thing as growth. If something genuinely needs more time, give it more time. But if you're already being handed a clear opportunity to choose, to respond, to begin, or to finally let something go, do not assume the spiritual thing to do is always to wait. Sometimes the most spiritual choice available to you, Pisces, is simply the one that's actually in front of you right now. The next eclipse may bring you clarity, but clarity is not the same thing as permission. You do not need permission from August 28th to act on something you already understand today. If you've made it all the way here, thank you for staying with me through this one, Pisces. Weeks like this can look quiet on the surface, but that stillness has never meant nothing is moving beneath it, not for a sign like yours. Keep paying attention to what keeps returning, to what slowly becomes clearer without asking for your attention, and to what begins gathering momentum long before the next eclipse arrives to confirm it. You don't need to force anything, and you don't need to put your life on hold waiting for the 28th either. Keep moving with what already feels real to you. Stay open to what this week still has left to show you. And remember, sometimes the biggest emotional shifts only make sense once you look back at them. Something good may already be taking shape, even if you can't see the full picture yet. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.